Welcome to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk.
Hey everyone, it's Jenny Lisk, and this is episode 104 of the Widowed Parent Podcast. I had such a great discussion with Mari Marquez for this episode. It was so much fun talking to Mari twice over the course of a few days, actually, once for her show and once for my show. It was really just so lovely to connect with her, hear all about her experiences, also her blog, her podcast, and her children's book, all of these really bringing badly needed resources to widowed parents. And also, importantly, she was very honest in our discussion about how hard it was for her right after her husband died and how much she struggled. And I think it's important to hear an honest discussion of these topics. So I hope you enjoy my discussion with Mari Marquez. Support for this podcast comes from BetterHelp. You can talk with a licensed professional therapist online, anytime, anywhere. Visit betterhelp.com/widowedparent to learn more and get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/widowedparent. I hope you'll check it out. My guest today is Mari Marquez. Mari is a widowed mom of a toddler. She's also the founder of the Embracing Widowhood podcast and website and the author of the new book for grieving kids called The Magical Soul. Mari, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. This is great. We've been talking on Instagram, and I am looking forward very much to talking to you soon as well for your show.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get to talk like twice in a row here. So this is awesome. But
we're going to become best friends.
I know, right? Like Instagram podcast widow buddies here.
Exactly. We'll start a group.
I know, right? Exactly. No, this is awesome. So, all right. Well, I'm anxious to dive into your story, hear all about your journey and your, parenting a very young daughter and your website and your podcast and your book and the whole deal. Let's just start way back at the beginning, before your life changed, before you became a widowed parent, when life was normal. Tell us a little bit about your family and your life at that point.
Well, before anything happened, life was great. I was at the peak of my marriage. We had been married at that time for 3 years and almost 4 years together. And Alex was my best friend. We had this beautiful connection at a soul level where, I would say something to him, and before I would finish my sentence, he would chime in and knew what I was, about to say. Our relationship was beautiful. We had a lot of laughter. He was my best friend, and life was good. Life was at the peak of my time where everyone was healthy and alive. We were trying to expand our family. At the time, we had a little daughter who was 13 months old, and we were trying to conceive our second baby. So life was good.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay. And now I feel like the other shoe is going to drop here. So tell us what happened.
So on October 12th of 2018, my daughter and I were at the grocery store when we got a phone call from my husband's younger brother letting me know that my husband had suffered an accident. And I remember telling him, I said, "Don't joke with me like that." And he said, "Mari, I'm not joking." So I immediately thought that he had been in a car accident.
Yeah.
And he said to me, "He's stable. He's awake, but he did burn. He suffered some burns."
Huh.
And I remember that this rush of shock run through my entire body, and I felt weak. And I said, "Okay." I said, please let me know where they're going to take him. And he said, "An ambulance is right here. They're going to take him to X hospital." So I said, "I'll be right there." And with whatever strength I could, I grabbed my little baby girl. And
you were at the grocery store, you said?
I was at the grocery store.
Wow. Huh.
I grabbed my little baby girl, and we rushed to the hospital. And as we're driving to the hospital, I felt like I was having a panic attack. And I worked on my breathing just to make sure that we, made it safely to the hospital.
Right.
And when we got to the hospital, his younger brother called me again, and he said they're going to airlift Alex to the burn unit center in town because he is, severely injured.
Wow.
So I said to him, please tell Alex that I love him. And he did. And then the last words that I heard from Alex were, I love her too. So I rushed to the burn unit center. And as I got there, I saw that the helicopter was arriving, but I couldn't get out of my car because I had my baby little girl in the back seat. And I was waiting for a family member to come and pick her up. So I saw them, take him into the hospital. And I felt like, my soul was rushing to him, but my body was in place right there with my daughter. It's like I wanted to be split into two.
Right.
And after help arrived, I rushed into the hospital. And by that time, he had already been intubated. So he had been intubated, and Alex burned almost 80% of his body.
Oh, mostly, wow. That's a lot.
Mostly being second and third degree burns. So we were not able to talk to him the whole time he was at the hospital because he was intubated. He had multiple surgeries, and on his third surgery, the graft in his back fell off. So they put pig skin or cadaver skin on burn survivors to cover their skin and help to try to
promote healing or something.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Exactly. And so after that graft fell, he just started declining pretty rapidly. And they couldn't get him into surgery again until they tried on Wednesday, October 24th, and they couldn't finish the surgery because he had coded on the table. And so they weren't able to close him properly. They had opened him up, and the next day he made it through the night, and the next day I got a call from the hospital telling me that they were going to take him into surgery. So I thought, he was going to make it.
Yeah.
And then about 15 minutes later, I got another call from the hospital, and I didn't want to answer the call. So I had my mother-in-law answer the phone, and she told me, she said, Mari, we have to go to the hospital now. So I drove myself, my daughter, and my mother-in-law to the hospital. And I remember stopping at a stoplight and looking up at the sky, and something just felt different. I can't explain it. Something just felt different. And my little girl, again, who was 13 months at the time, she kept saying, Papa, Papa, Papa. And when we got to the hospital, I couldn't get out of my vehicle. My husband's younger brother had to help me and his mother. And as soon as we went into the burn unit center, there was a psychologist and a chaplain waiting for us. And all I can remember, they said, is he passed away at 9:05 a.m.
Is that when you were in the car? When you... Wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I'm sorry. That sounds really, really hard.
Yeah. It was very difficult.
Yeah. How long was the number? How many days, or from the time of the accident to the time he passed away?
It was 13 days. So he died on October 25th, 2018.
That's a long 2 weeks of
torture.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it was torture. It was very difficult. And he passed away 4 months after I had just buried my father. So,
oh no.
Yeah. So I was still grieving my father. And then we had just made a very big life decision for me to quit my corporate career of over a decade to be a stay-at-home mom and expand our family. So it's just so many life changes. And then he passed away.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And did I read, I felt like maybe I read on your blog, did you have a miscarriage at some point in there as well?
I did.
Wow.
I did. Yeah, that was difficult. We had been trying to conceive a baby and I was late. And I ended up miscarrying the baby a few weeks after, not knowing I had miscarried because I was in so much grief that, I just didn't think of it. I've never had a miscarriage before, so I really didn't know what that looked like until eventually I did. And that's another loss I've had to grieve. So
yeah, well, and 3 in very quick succession.
Exactly. Yeah,
wow.
All within 4 months.
Yeah. So that was 2018. So that was a bad year.
That was one hell of a year, to say the least.
Yes. Well, okay. So can you tell us, so what were those early days, weeks, months? Like, what was it? What was the beginning like?
It was shocking. I was in denial. I felt, even though, I knew he had died, that he would walk in through that door, through our front door, that I would get a call from him.
Yeah.
It just seems so unreal that this would actually happen to me, right? These are the types of things that you hear that someone else experiences until it happens to you.
Right.
So it was very difficult. It was dark. Half of my family was grieving my father and the other half of my family was grieving my husband. And I tried to go back to work and I was denied by the corporation that I worked. They told me that I would. Yeah, I had worked for them for many years and I was in leadership. I had an MBA, over a decade of experience.
Oh, I have an MBA too.
Oh, good.
I'm sorry. This isn't a job discussion. I'm just, you hear somebody has something in common.
We're soul sisters, Jenny.
I know, right? I know. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I've interrupted your train of thought here. So you called them up and said, can I, because you had just left, because you just decided that you were going to expand your family and switch gears. And so then you called them up and said, actually, can I come back? And they said, no.
No, they said that I would have to start all over from the bottom.
Whoa.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. It was pretty shocking. I was devastated because, I had a pretty good salary. I had a really good career there within the organization. It had just happened 3 months after, or 3 months before that I had just left. So it hadn't been a long time. And I felt just incredibly lost. I was not seeking support. And I almost ended my life. I had an episode where I couldn't deal with the pain anymore. I didn't know how to live anymore because everything that I knew to be true was just gone so suddenly and so tragically.
Right.
And here I am with this, I guess, new life, right? With a 13-month-old daughter and not knowing what to do, no guidance. So I had an episode where I almost ended my life.
Wow. Thank you for telling us about that, because I don't think enough people are honest about that. And it is a struggle. I know a lot of people are struggling and have probably thought similarly, either maybe more or less seriously about it. But, I'm sure that thought has crossed people's minds.
It is. It is something that's common to think about because, your whole life changes.
Yeah.
Feels like everything just stops and just everything else around you keeps going and you're just stuck there.
Yeah.
And that was my lowest point in my grief journey. But it was also an opportunity for me to recognize that I needed help, that I needed to seek support. And, that's also part of why actually the main reason why I started embracing widowhood.com is so people can go ahead and find some sort of whatever type of support, that they're looking for on there that can help them in one way or another.
Well, so tell us about that. So how did you find support? How did you start that, crawling out of that lowest place?
So my mother-in-law attended a retreat for grieving parents. And the people facilitating that retreat was an organization, the founder of an organization called Eric's House. And, she kept telling my mother-in-law, let me talk to her. I think it would be good for, her to speak to someone. And I eventually did. And I was very grateful that I made the call and saw someone.
Yeah. Yeah, terrific. Okay. Well, and I think that's, there are, I don't know exactly what Eric's House does, but there are organizations in many communities, most, I would say maybe, with programs for adults, for teenagers, for little kids, that do provide grief support. And I think actually, did you mention at some point that you had come across the NAGC and they had some research? Can you tell us about that?
They did. So I do want to say that I was not on social media. So, the support that I did seek out here locally, it was for a much different demographic. So it was hard. It was hard to find support for a young widow.
Like grief groups were tended to be people who were much older than you and
yes,
who had grown children and lost their spouse, and they were maybe 70 or 80 or 90 and not 20 something or 30 something, however
in the
old you were.
30s. Yeah. 30s, yeah.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I just started doing some more research to really try to help myself in my situation. So, one of the things that I really delved into was, after death communication and near-death experiences, because when you lose someone, when you lose your spouse, their absence is so apparent. From the time that you wake up to the time that you go to sleep, there's just an empty space there. And even though I had, my faith, well, at that point I had lost my faith because we prayed so much for Alex to, be whole again, to get better. And, he ended up dying.
Right.
But, I had lost my faith and I just wanted to know, just to provide that comfort for me that Alex was out there. I don't care if he was a particle in the air, anything at all, but that some form of him was still out there. So I delved into that. And, through my research, I came across the National Alliance for Grieving Children organization. And, as a parent, I also wondered and thought, how am I going to explain this to this baby?
Yeah.
Whose father died.
Right.
And, as you know, like death is an uncomfortable conversation or, topic to talk about with adults, let alone with children. So I really delved into some research, how to talk to her. And I got a lot of great information on the National Alliance for Grieving Children's website. So I highly recommend it.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. I am a member of the National Alliance for Grieving Children. And they have a lot of great programming. And they also have on their website, and it's childrengrieve.org, I believe, a finder where you can look at your location and you can find what kinds of grief programs and camps and centers are in, your city. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes, because I think that if somebody is, is looking for something or thinks that might be helpful, that's a great place to find those. And I should say that many of the centers have been doing virtual programming or virtual options, during the pandemic. So, don't think that everything's canceled or something because of the limitations on in-person gathering. Yeah, good. Well, I'm glad you found that. That's terrific. So, okay. At some point, you started Embracing Widowhood. And so that is a website and a podcast and maybe more. Can you tell us, I guess, why, first of all, why did you start this?
So I started this because I had difficulty, finding resources when I became a widow, young widow, right? And when I would find resources, I didn't know, should I go to this? Should I do this? What should I do? I didn't know the way I was grieving was, I don't want to say normal, but common. And I just questioned a lot. I questioned myself a lot. Am I doing this right? Am I not? And because I didn't have a lot of support in the beginning, as far as resources that I didn't know about, I almost, like I said, ended my life. And I wanted to put something out there in one place that other widowed women can go ahead and look at, whether it's a video of another widow talking about their story or a recommended book or a specific widowed organization like the Modern Widows Club, Soaring Spirits International, that, they can go ahead and reach out to them. So, and, we know that, people will grieve very differently. Some people might see somebody, professionally. Some others might just, stick to meditation, whatever might work for them. Right. But I just wanted to go ahead and provide a variety of things that, can help people in one way or another. So, and it is a national resource site and blog for the widowed community.
Yeah. Terrific. Okay, good. And there's a podcast element to it as well.
Yes, it's the Embracing Widowhood podcast. And there I expand on my blogs that I write about what I'm going through as a widow. I share resources on there, and you will be on it, next week. So I'm excited about that.
I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Okay. Well, I'll put the link to your podcast and your blog and your website in the show notes as well. And speaking of your blog, there was a post that you did, I think, recently, and it was called something like Solo Parenting versus Single Parenting.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Are you going to get me in trouble, Jenny?
No. I think it's a really important distinction.
Absolutely. So with solo parenting, I mean, we're on 24/7, right? It was not a choice for us to not have our other spouse or, the parent of a child there with us to help them raise, these children. And with single parenting, you do have, obviously every situation is different, but, sometimes you do have the option to call the other person and say, hey, what should I do in this instance? How can I handle this? Or, hey, can you help me in a pinch and, watch the kids.
Right.
And as a solo parent, you can't call them. They're dead, right? They're not gonna answer that line, let me tell you.
Right.
So it's just so much. There's, even when raising children, right, the aspect of death doesn't exist with single parenting, even though in certain situations it might feel like a death, right? There's still that option and that capability of being able to reach out to that other person, where in solo parenting, you don't have that.
Well, and the child can talk to and see and be involved with, in most cases, not in all cases, right? As you said, depends on the circumstances, but in many cases, that other parent is part of their life.
Exactly.
In some fashion. It might not be as much as anybody wants. It might not be what anybody expected. But generally there is some involvement.
Or even financially, being able to contribute to them financially. As a solo parent, you don't sometimes have that. Well, you don't have the luxury. So
Yeah. Right. Okay, good. Well, and another thing that I wanted to ask about, I think it was in one of your posts or videos, you mentioned that some people have suggested that your daughter was so young,
Mhm.
13 months old. Oh, maybe she won't remember. So what? I don't know. Maybe it's not a big deal, or maybe it's not a big problem, or maybe something, minimizing. What have you found out, or what do you think about? What's your reaction to those kind of comments?
Well, they hurt, or they used to hurt a lot more back then.
Yeah.
And I used to believe them until I started to do my own research. And, my little daughter, she was starting to learn how to walk before her father died, and she regressed in that. She didn't end up walking until 5 months after he had passed. So she was late in her walking, and just the conversations that, I've had to have with her and explain to her the distinction between the body and the soul, which that was actually part of what inspired to write the Magical Soul book, is to know that, whether it's from a religious standpoint or from a scientific standpoint through quantum physics and, energy, right? Energy cannot be destroyed. And our religious beliefs or religion beliefs, suggest that we're more than just a physical body. So for me, learning this information, it was vital for me to share it, with her, but in a very childlike form. So she can still have that hope that she will be reconnected with her father, once her time is up here on earth. And because we're all going to die, at one point or another.
Right.
And we don't know when that time will come. So sometimes it comes, when they're still in the womb, miscarriage, or, at different stages in life.
Right.
So.
Right. But it is inevitable, as you say, at some point. Hopefully many more years for each of us and for all of our listeners here.
Right. Absolutely.
But yeah. Well, so one of the things I was thinking, and I do want to ask you more about your book in a minute, about your daughter being so young. It's interesting. I've found it really interesting as a parent to try to learn a little bit about, like, what does grief mean to a 1-year-old, a 5-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 16-year-old, like a 25, like, how does a child's understanding change, with their developmental changes. Right. And the fact that, like, you could have a 2-year-old and, you can explain, the person died and what does that mean? And their body stopped working and all these things. And you think they understand. And then 15 minutes later, they're like, when's dad coming home? And you're like, oh my God, we just talked about this. He's dead. Right. Yeah. And you might have that same conversation like a lot of times, which can be really traumatizing for the adult. Right. Who's like, how many times do I have to explain? But developmentally, they don't understand the permanence. Right. Of death. And then eventually they do. And then they understand more. And then they have to grieve again a little differently because now they have a new understanding. Right. And they're processing that all over again.
Yeah, absolutely. So Judy's House is a great organization that sometimes does offer, free workshops for caregivers and parents to help you learn some of this information at how children will grieve at different stages in their lives. So I know with my daughter, we've talked about the distinction between the body and the soul, but, sometimes she does tell me, can I have another dad? Or she pretends to be talking to my husband on the phone and says, and I ask her, what are you doing? I'm talking to Papa, and if you do ask her, where's Papa? She'll tell you in heaven. And I think for me as a parent, with a young child, I try to normalize, our situation as best as possible. I know that it'll probably change and she'll have more questions as she grows up and, develops a much greater understanding. But it was on the National Alliance for Grieving Children that there's some research done or that's out there that says, depending on how we grieve as caregivers and as parents, it's a direct correlation how it'll be, how it will impact your child.
Yeah, the outcomes.
So, for me, that was very was like a wow moment. It was like, whoa, I have to get myself together. I have to help myself through this so I can not only help myself, but be an example for her. And just to help her better, cope with her grief, because she will grieve at different stages in her life.
Right.
And I, as a parent, just want to better prepare myself as best as I can. Right.
Yeah.
To help her through that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I'm glad you mentioned the idea of talking about it openly and I think you said normalizing it or normalizing the discussions of it.
Right.
Because, I mean, you're absolutely right. As she gets older and is getting new understanding, as a parent, you want her to know that she can talk about it, right?
Right.
And she can express concerns or questions or emotions or whatever the case may be.
Right.
And if you've been normalizing the fact all along that we can talk about this, she's much more likely to talk about it when she's, puberty brain upgrades start, right?
Older, yeah.
And right, that's a while for her in your case, but the brain massively upgrades at that point, and they get all this new understanding. And so by having that door open, that yes, we can talk about this,
right?
And you've set that pattern then for many years at that point. Right. That's terrific. I think that's something that I think is really important for parents to keep in mind. Can be helpful.
Yeah. Well, as a society, I don't think we do a really good job at, talking about death. And it's the number one thing that is definitely going to happen. And it's a for sure thing.
Yeah.
And, how can we better, and I don't want to say cope with the death of a loved one because it is hard, but how can we better integrate loss into our lives as healthy as possible?
Right.
Because we can't change the outcome at the end, but we can definitely change what happens from now to then.
Yeah, right.
And if we can impact and influence our children in a positive way, and I know maybe some people are not going to be happy with the word normalized, but that's my take as a parent of a young child.
Yeah. Well, and normalizing the discussion,
right?
I think is absolutely, yeah. Okay, you just said something that I was thinking, I should ask her about, and then but that's all right. Hey, so tell me more about this book. So, you wrote a book. It's a children's book. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so it's called The Magical Soul, and it is an inspirational book for young children, just to provide some hope, comfort, and connection after a loss. The ages, for this book is between 3 to 8 or 3 to 9, depending on the child, right? But it is meant to explain the distinction between the body and the soul in a very childlike form, and provide hope that, they're going to be reconnected with their loved ones, again. It's also important to know that they can still have a connection with their loved one. So whether it's talking to them, telling them, about their day, telling them that they miss them, it's so important for our children to be able to verbalize, right, what they're feeling. And if they miss their dad or mom, just go ahead and tell them, right?
Yeah.
And, but it's also important at the end of the book, there's a message that says, it's important to live our life right now, right? To create these beautiful stories. So when our soul goes up to heaven, that we're going to be able to tell our stories in detail to our loved ones. So, it's important to remind our little ones that we can still live a fulfilled life with joy and love, even after our loved ones are gone.
Yeah. Okay. Terrific. And so again, it's an illustrated picture book. For young children. What does your daughter think about the book?
She loves it. I have read it to her so many times.
I bet you have.
I'm like, oh my gosh, again. But I'm actually in the works of doing the book in the Spanish version.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I got so many questions. If it's going to be in Spanish or when is the Spanish version coming up? Obviously I'm part of the Hispanic community. So I'm in the works of doing that. I'm really excited about that as well.
That's terrific. Yeah. Well, so when's that going to be ready?
In a few weeks. We're working on it.
Good.
Yeah, in a few weeks. And but the Magical Soul is just, I'm just very proud of that project. I've received so many comments and just how helpful it has been for even parents, right, to start that conversation about death with their little ones. And it's amazing. It's being sold in the UK, in Australia, in Canada. So I'm really excited about that.
Nice. And in the US, of course.
Of course.
All over. I'm assuming it's on Amazon and maybe other places as well.
Yes, it's on Amazon, it's through Ingram Spark, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, Target. So yeah, it's out there. So I'm really, really happy about that project.
Yeah, good. Well, when you do have the Spanish language version available, you'll have to send me the link and I'll add that to the show notes page.
Thank you.
So that we can have both versions available there for anybody who may be looking for that. That's exciting.
Thank you.
That's great. Is there very much Spanish language material for young kids on this topic?
So I've seen a few, but no, not that many. Not that many. And to be quite honest, I bought a lot of books for my daughter, to try to help me, help her understand this whole thing. But for me, there wasn't one particular book that really talked about the distinction between the body and the soul in a very childlike form.
Right.
And, so throughout the past 2 years, I've developed these conversations and these things that I was going to say to her. And, I said, well, if it's helping her, I saw how it was impacting her in a positive way. I said, why not share it with anyone else? So, so we decided to create the book. Yeah.
Well, so often the best things, they arise from a need that somebody sees, a gap, something in their own life that they're trying to solve or struggle with or explain or whatever. And so, I think it's terrific identifying this need of, helping your daughter with these concepts and realizing you could put the same ideas into a book for kids everywhere.
Right. So it's a beautiful book. And, it's a light book for a hard topic. Right? So
Yeah. Good. Okay, good. Well, thank you for telling us about that. I think we could keep talking here all day about all this, but we probably should wrap up soon here.
Yeah.
So let me ask you one last question, if you don't mind. I like to ask all of my guests some version of this question. Sometimes I change it up a little bit depending on, their topic they're speaking about, or maybe if I'm just feeling differently on a day. But anyway, the question is, if you could say one thing to widowed parents, what would you say to them?
I can say one thing to them. I can say many things to them.
Well, okay, you can say two. You could just, give us a couple if you like.
One is that they're going to be okay. I think I really needed to hear those words initially. When I became a widow and I didn't know how I was going to be okay, but when someone said to me, "You're going to be okay," it just resonated with me. I believed them when they said that to me. And the second thing is, it's that it's so important to seek out support. However, that may look like for you, but it's so important to be able to talk about, what we're going through, our struggles, our pain, and know that we're not alone in this. There's so many women before us that have gone through it, and there's so many women who are going to come, after us. And, it's important to give your grief an outlet, a release of some sort, to help you through it. So I'll keep it at 2.
2 is great. I think that's a great place to end. So my guest today is Mari Marquez, widowed mom and founder of the Embracing Widowhood podcast and website, and the author of the children's book, The Magical Soul. So Mari, where can listeners find you, find your website, your podcast, your book, if they'd like to learn more about you and your work?
Sure. So my website is embracingwidowhood.com. The podcast is called the Embracing Widowhood Podcast. It's on Spotify and Apple. And, you can find me on Facebook, Embracing Widowhood, as well as on Instagram. I'm under Mari Marquez author. So, and the book, The Magical Soul, is available again on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, Target, Ingram Spark, Walmart. So, yeah. If you guys just search for it, it'll be out there. So.
Yeah, good. And I will put all those links in the show notes, of course, as well, so that people can find them easily and jump right over to all those. So, yeah, terrific. Okay, well, Mari, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Mari Marquez as much as I did. You can find show notes and all the links at widowedparentpodcast.com. Look for episode 104. And if you're not on my email list, head on over to jennylisk.com, JENNYLISK.com, and make sure you jump on my email list. I do send out every week these episodes, as well as resources, book recommendations, other things that I think may be of use to my listeners, widowed parents. So please do make sure that you're on my list. And if you appreciate the show and you've learned something from it and you'd like to see the show continue, you can now buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. I really do love coffee, and it's always great to hear from listeners that the show is resonating and helpful. So again, head on over to buymeacoffee.com/widowedparent. As always, thank you for listening, and until next week, keep smiling.
Thank you for listening to the Widowed Parent Podcast with your host, Jenny Lisk. Connect with us on social media and at widowedparentpodcast.com.